I'm Nancy Borda. I'm your former Congresswoman. When I ran in 2006 and won, there were 5,000 yard signs across and possibly can to keep them out of homelessness. I get to volunteer with a couple of other organizations on a board. So I live a perfect life. And the question is, why on earth would you do this? Well, I am so concerned about what is going on in our country today that I said that I have to get up and run. I'm so concerned that trust has been so broken with your neighbors across our country. We've lost trust in each other. We've lost trust in our government. And truly, if we don't have trust, we don't get to keep this beloved country of ours. So I am running. I will tell you that there is a little something that you have to do if you want to go to Congress and make a difference. You actually have to win. And I'm the only Democrat to have held this seat for 30 years. Why? Let's say this in unison. I am a strong, independent, moderate woman who will break with her party, who will be bipartisan, have the record to show it, and the experience. And I am asking for your vote. A vote for me, I want to be real clear, a vote for me is saying that you are done with all the craziness in DC and that you're coming to work with me to rebuild trust in our country.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Matt Kleiman.
Good evening. So my name is Matt Kleiman, and I am proud to be running for the 2nd Congressional District of Kansas. I grew up in Kansas, and I've been here my whole life. I was raised as a Christian, love God, love my neighbor, and leave it better than I found it. And I was fortunate enough to go play for KU basketball, and I was there in the 2008 National Championship team. Bill Self went around the room and goes, "You're going to be a first-round draft pick, you're going to be a second-round draft pick." He looks at me and goes, "You're going to be a first-round draft pick, you're going to be a second-round draft pick." Because at that moment, I realized I needed to get a job. And so I was studying architecture. I was thinking I'm going to build stadiums, right? But what I didn't realize is that communities don't need stadiums as much as they need access to affordable housing. They need good paying jobs. They need sidewalks so their kids can get to school safely. They need parks. We need things in our community, and we know that we have not been invested in. This is the work that I've been doing every day for the last 10 years. I've worked with communities who didn't have access to a grocery store. So we listened to what their needs were. We identified where we could bring fresh, affordable food to the community, and we went out and did it. We worked with community groups who were struggling to make ends meet. I had young people I would train on apprenticeship trade skills so they could build more affordable housing in our community. I've done the work every day for the last 10 years. And so that is my platform. We are working to build up our communities. We need more federal investment. We were talking here earlier about airports and some of the grants that come through the federal government. We're not getting enough resources back into our community. We cannot property tax our way to prosperity. And I also believe that we need to protect our rights. I don't know if y'all have seen Project 2025, but as of right now, if you make less than $168,000, your federal income taxes are going to go up $6,600 for a family of 4. That's not right. We have real issues in our country, and I respect everybody else in this panel. It's going to take more than raising goats or being out in the community. This is the work that I've been doing for the last 10 years, and I'm very proud to say that I'm a Democrat. I'm also proud to say that we need to be building up our communities and making them stronger. So I just appreciate your support. We have an election on August 6th. Early voting is open now.
Thank you. And just a reminder to the audience for candidates, the yellow is for 30 seconds. The red is when you're done. And with that, we will move to Jeff.
Thank you very much. My name is Jeff Cars. I'm from Topeka, Kansas. My lovely wife is here at Honeywood. Stand up real quick and let everybody see you. Pleasure to be here. For the last 3 years, I've worked for Congressman LaTurner. I've been his district director and his senior advisor, overseeing his district operations. But before that, I was raised in Wichita. I worked for Congressman Todd Tiahrt in D.C. for 16 years. Came back and worked for Governor Brownback, and we did welfare reform, and we're able to cut our welfare rolls in half by helping people get work, requiring them that they look for work, and then happy to help them find work, which is always a very good thing. We got the attention of President Trump because of all the great things that we did there with welfare reform. He invited me to join his administration, and I helped oversee HHS in the Midwest, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and Iowa. Then Jake hired me up to helped set up his DC office. Jake came and told me before he made it public that him and Suzanne decided not to run again. He made the announcement. My wife and I received a lot of calls and emails and texts from around the district and the state in Washington, D.C. We're people of faith, so we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. I put out fleeces, and we felt like the Lord wanted us to do this. So we're in this race, and the main reason we're in this race is because our country's in trouble. It's in serious trouble. I don't think it's too late, but I think the hour is late. We were reminded how much trouble we were in just last weekend in Pennsylvania. We have open borders. We have a president that has an open border policy, and so our communities are less safe. Violence is increasing. Inflation is out of control. We have a teetering economy. And I also like to talk about what I call the collapse of our culture. It seems like our families, our children, our shared common values, and our culture are under attack from the extreme left. And so see, these are some of the reasons that I'm running for office. Hopefully we'll be able to address the other issues as well and what I hope to do about it if I get elected to Congress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael A. Ogle?
I just want to say Nicole said yes, so we are now engaged.
Congratulations.
I'm running for Congress because I want congressional term limits. And if you want congressional term limits without a constitutional convention, you're going to have to send representatives to Washington that will advocate for and will vote for congressional term limits. I am for American energy independence. We just got out of a 20-year war in Afghanistan. We didn't get out for a good reason. We got out to let China in to mine lithium. China buys us swaths of land the size of Nebraska in Africa to mine lithium. Mining lithium is not a green process. We buy that lithium from China, we bring it back over here, we put it in our green cars, and we call it good. Well, it's not good. We need American energy independence. We need a lower cost of goods and services by lowering the cost of bringing products to market based off the security of American energy. We have to get American energy going. I am for the Constitution of the United States. You look, even at the border, which China just had a period in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, sex selection, abortion, and now they have a surplus of military-age males, which they're exporting around the world. At the border, Governor Abbott has just said there's 60,000 Chinese males that try to cross the border, military-age males try to cross the border. These are things that we have to deal with. We have to secure American exceptionalism on the back of American energy. I am 100% for mental health awareness. I have a story that if I take to Washington, we'll get mental health services provided for people here in Kansas, and we'll get mental health services provided to both the sheriff's deputies and the people that are arresting. I got to tell you, one sheriff in Kansas has told me, you know, my department will spend $1,000 a piece on body armor, but they won't secure mental health services for my deputies. And he said, well, I need to get mental health services. That's something that we have to do. I work with veterans every day as a service officer for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I bring back $250 million in benefits, and it's a lot of trauma. We deal with it every day.
Thank you, Mr. Ogle.
Thank you.
Lastly, Mr. Young?
My name is Chad Young. I worked in a nonprofit that I started 10 years ago, almost 11. I've seen a lot of young youth that were on drugs. I've seen a lot of veterans come and get help through my programs. But I began to notice that it was the same old thing. The young people, the young women and men that came through my program, that there were some issues. So I started studying how America is being attacked. Not only physically, mentally, spiritually, obviously from foreign lands. And I studied as hard as I could to find out where the issues were. And as a previous professional boxing coach and a professional fighter, I noticed you have to understand who you're fighting before you go fight. You have to study hard your opponent. We have not studied hard on our opponents. Our opponents in America, yeah, they're China, they're Russia, they're other places, but they're us too. We've allowed big corporations, big pharma, to annihilate us. We need to fight back there. There is no reason big pharma should own 85% of all your food markets, your food corporations. There's no reason for that. You need to question why that is. We need to stand up and fight back. We don't do enough fighting back. We do enough sitting down. and voting in the same politician every time to expect something to change. That's insanity. We have to stop voting in politicians. They work for the program that's before you. We have to break that mold like Trump did. He broke the mold. Reagan, he broke the mold. It's time to break the mold. There's a lady in here that I look up to. She doesn't even know I look up to her. Tyson, right back there. Thank you for your hard work. But I look up to her. She may not look up to me, but that doesn't matter. I'll still look what she does. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll hold all of us in. Ask pretty much anyone in Allen County what their small towns need, and it's housing. The same goes for most of rural America. There's not enough of it, and what we have doesn't match the needs of our communities. What are some solutions to the housing crisis, and what role could the federal government play if it did play one? Nancy, we'll start with you.
Can we do not alphabetical order from here?
Sure.
I'd rather not, thank you.
Yeah? Anyone want to go first?
I'll take it. So, not everybody lives in a $500 apartment, but everybody knows somebody who needs that, or you needed it previously in your lifetime. We have a housing market that we cannot build for. I've been down in Pittsburgh, been down in Humboldt. We can't build for less than $200,000. We cannot build housing for less than $200,000 without a lot of federal subsidies. Years ago, we block granted away our community development dollars. That can change at a federal level. We can put breakers in on the mortgage and property tax increases. We can put a 5% cap on rent. There are federal policies that they're talking about right now that actually can help people stay in their homes. We can create an insurance market so that when folks lose their job, which happens, it happens to all of us. I've lost my job before. You don't lose your home. We can have opportunities where the federal government actually goes to work for us. It doesn't just expect us to be out of the street. There are federal projects that we can work on right now that would address our housing issues. But we need folks to get together on the same page. This is not a red versus blue issue. This is our country. If we cannot get people in housing, we're going to face a bigger crisis than what we realize today with homelessness. But it takes federal investment. It takes people working together. It takes us using our resources, working with state and local governments. And as somebody who's actually trained in construction trade skills apprentices, as somebody who's actually worked on tiny home projects, as somebody who's actually done the work, it's possible. It is possible. I want you to know this. It is possible. What you don't have is elected leaders who know how to do it.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to take that question? How about that? I do that, and then if nobody else wants to take it, I can move on.
No, I'll take it, I'll take
Okay.
it. So this is a huge issue for everyone, but especially our young people. They cannot see a future in how they're going to find even rents, much less buy a house. So as I say, I deal with homelessness and the lack of affordable housing, and I mean truly affordable housing, is appalling. So I agree with what Matt said, and I would add, and I think we would agree, that we can really do more with building trades. And someone who does know how to change a toilet, somebody who does know how to do these things, and looking at on our property of bringing more homes in tiny homes. I see that around the state that our local governments and counties are ready to kind of loosen up some of their requirements and make a little bit more dense out in the counties. So I would agree with what you say. I would say additionally that we need to put more funds towards building trades. As somebody called them in the last one, the hard tangible trades that we need. I would also say that federal investment can help get these housing, low-income and middle-income housing on the ground and do it now. I would also say that we have to do something about a federal budget and a federal deficit. So putting too much money in, we need to be careful in how we do it. I would also say that the federal government should be very, very, very careful in what they're doing with rent controls. They can turn around and boomerang on us, and we need to be extremely careful on how we handle that. But our young people are worried about how they're going to afford a home, and this is one of the top issues that we need to address.
Thank you.
Could you read it one more time?
Sure. Ask pretty much anyone in Allen County what their small towns need, and it's housing. The same goes for most of rural America. There's not enough of it, and what we have doesn't match the needs of our communities. What are some solutions to the housing crisis, and what role could the federal government play, if one?
Well, I'm gonna say this as clear as I can. We can no longer allow big corporation to buy out the middle-class homes, and they're doing that. Agenda 230 is clearly buying out all the middle-class homes. We've got to stop that. Trade schools have a lot to do with that. If we put a trade school in every community college, a trade school right next to it, we can build America complete. We will no longer give to foreign lands like, obviously, if you look at the electric here in America, it's run by China corporations. That's scary. We want to bring that back to America. So let's make some electricians, let's make some plumbers, let's make some road workers. Let's bring tech schools back to America in every college. And you know what? Those people will be able to buy a home. Taxes will fall. No, they will. Because people aren't out there doing drugs. And quit bringing foreigners over to go to our colleges. Close that border. That's the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to take that?
Yeah, briefly, I'll just say that I think by and large it's a state and local issue. There are federal grants up there, but we have a major deficit problem in this country. It is significant. It's one of the main reasons why I'm running. We're going to be at $50 trillion of debt by the end of this decade. You talk to top economists, they say that could be a tipping point for our currency. We've got BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia, others, that are uniting behind their own currency. They're dropping the petrodollar. By the end of this decade, we could have a crisis on our hand that we have never seen since the Great Depression. So we have to be serious about what's going on with our spending up there. We have to look at every program. I don't think we need a Department of Education. I don't think that we need a Department of Commerce. We have to look at other cabinet level agencies. If Congress doesn't get our budget and our deficit and our debt under control by the end of this decade, we will all hurt from it. Because Congress could be forced to do major cuts. The good news is if we lose our world currency status, or even if it's demoted, which could potentially happen by the end of this decade, the good news is Congress won't deficit spend anymore, because no one's going to buy our T-bills. The bad news is everything's going to get cut dramatically. So we have to really keep our eyes on that. That's one of the main reasons I'm running. I'm worried about what the future for my kids and your kids if we don't get this under control.
Thank you. Mr. Ogle, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I'm the only warrior that you can send to Washington, and I gotta tell you, I'm weary of unnecessary foreign entanglements. I'm like General George Washington was, and I'm very weary of the military-industrial complex like President Eisenhower was. Our dollars need to be spent here on us, if we spend them at all. Our allies need to step up and do more. Our real threats are not from our threats, it's that our allies don't do enough. And when you see some of the nice social programs our allies have, it's because we're footing the bill for their defense. And I gotta tell you, I don't want to cut nuclear deterrence spending, but I don't want to send American sons and daughters around the world to kick everybody in the teeth either, because that costs a whole lot of money and a whole lot of lives. I've seen it, and it isn't good. We get the cost of spending down in America, we get the cost of debt down in America, then we can address interest rates, get people into houses that they can afford. And when it comes to homelessness, you have to address criminality and being able to get people to rent to criminals that have been felon. I gotta tell you, that's the answer. There's money all day that people will give you to rent a place, but there's not places for people to rent from. That's what makes people homeless. That and mental illness. So we've addressed those topics.
Thank you. September 30th Farm Bill deadline is on the horizon. But as Washington enters election season, there has been basically no progress on a new farm bill. Major parts of the last farm bill, passed in 2018, are set to expire. What does a successful farm bill look like in your eyes? How can we help get past the current impasse? Anybody want to take that first?
I'll take it. So I was actually on the Agriculture Committee when I was in Congress, in the 110th Congress. That was 2007 to 2009. And it was a lot has changed since that farm bill. When we did that farm bill, 50% of the issue was SNAP. Today, it's what, 75 or 80%, Jeff?
It's almost at 90.
So we have, the farm bill certainly is of a huge priority when it comes to agriculture, but we need to understand that the farm bill is a lot about nutrition. And I think we should have some talks about how we spend some of those monies sometimes, and how we're doing that, how we're spending that money. When I was in Congress, it was interesting. The Democrats had just gotten the majority, a lot because a few of us from rural areas came. And I got the chance to go to talk to a lot of Democrats about farming in Kansas. And I talked to the farmers in Kansas and went back and said, here's what you need to know. If we don't subsidize some things, we will get even bigger and bigger farms. And they didn't understand any of it. So I got a chance to be one-on-one with all the representatives. I got a chance to be one-on-one with our leadership and say, this is what's happening in Kansas agriculture. So yes, we are taking care of our large farmers. That's a huge part of our economy. We are also taking care of our smaller farmers, and then a great big part of the farm bill, the non-food stamp part, is rural development. And I should have said that I believe I've said for years that rural America is really the last place in America to gentrify. And gentrify has a connotation that's good and bad, right? But people are coming back to rural America because they need affordable housing, because they want a safe place to raise their kids, because they want to be in community. And I believe that everything that we can do, those dollars spent federally on rural development will pay for Kansas, and the benefits are just enormous.
Thank you. Anybody else want to take that question? It's related to the farm bill.
So, I actually think there's some bipartisan compromise here.
I think there's a lot.
This is a bill about bipartisan compromise. It's a bill that needs our farmers as much as we need our cities. I worked on the Dot Mobile Grocery Project, which was a mobile grocery store that carried a WIC. I can tell you, I listened to mothers with 3 or 4 children struggle to find places to spend WIC because there was no grocery store in their community. And part of the challenge is, whether it's your farmers or your grocery stores, and this is something that Chad talked about, we have some big corporations that are not serving our interests in our community. We have folks who are squeezing our farmers when they're buying their seeds, they're squeezing their farmers when they sell to market. When I'm talking to farmers, their biggest issue is not the farm bill, their biggest issue is the tariffs. They're worried about tariffs getting jacked up and they don't have a market to sell to. But when it comes to getting nutrition to our communities, I went to the National WIC Conference to talk about this mobile market. And I kid you not, and this is for Chad, I think you have a really good point. I got bombarded with Welch's grape juice, with Cheerios, with all these corporations that have embedded themselves in the federal government. You can't get WIC food items. This is for pregnant and expectant mothers up to 5 years old, young mothers. You want to go buy food on federal assistance programs, you're buying sugar. You're buying corporate branded products. There is no healthy food.
Amen.
So we have some bipartisan support on this. What we need to do is get past our political divides and recognize that we can take care of our farmers and we can feed our communities in Kansas. We don't need to be selling across the world. We can sell right here locally, but we need to be working together.
Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, okay.
I'll second this as well. The Republican-controlled House Ag Committee has already passed out an excellent farm bill. Most of the problem is food stamps. And we need to separate food stamps from the farm bill because we need to overhaul food stamps dramatically. You should not be able to use food stamps, as an example, and go get prepared food at a gas station. That's not what food stamps was all about. You shouldn't be able to go and load up on soda pop and candy. Food stamps are to make sure that you have food to survive and live. So that's the hell of it. The ag bill, the farm bill right now is like 90% food stamps. So that's why we don't have a farm bill right now. We're going to get, Congress will get a farm bill passed, or they'll extend this one into the next Congress, which very well may happen, frankly. But what things that I want to do is we have to look at all of these subsidies. We have to look at solar subsidies. We have to look at wind subsidies. We don't need those. It distorts our economy. We don't need solar farms that are taking good agricultural land off of the grid. It's wrong. So let's get rid of the subsidies, the federal subsidies for solar and wind, and let's see if there's really a market there for those products. I would guess that there probably is not.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Young.
Running my nonprofit, I fed a lot of kids. It was a small school for troubled youth, young women and young men up to the ages of 35 and veterans. I had to prove to the government what I was feeding them. I couldn't give an extra piece of cheese to a child. No, they would look at that. But I started investigating. As a professional boxing coach, I've taken a lot of fighters all the way to the top. But by feeding them the proper stuff. 90% of our foods have yellow dyes, red dye 40. It's poison. Other countries will not take our food over there. But I'm going to get to the farmers. 64% of everything that's done with our farmers, big corporations has their hands. Big pharma has their hands. GMOs have taken over. These aren't real foods. We need to get back to real farming. We need to give them 100% of what's theirs. We need to stop big corporations from taking our farmers out. Their idea for the Agenda 230 is clearly this. They want to own that farmland and that farmer. This is all true. We need to fight back as a people. Look, we can go up there and Band-Aid everything you want. It ain't going to work. We have to fight back now and give the farmer his freedom.
Thank you. Mr. Ogle, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I think we need to do what we can for farmers, and we need to do what we can for, to get, good, solid food to urban environments as well. I would support urban gardens, and I would support, what we can do for farmers. Here's the deal. I think the UN, this is not necessarily a local thing, but the UN has predicted there's 250 million refugees that will be walking away from established food sources around the globe by 2050, and they're not going to be there. So my idea is that Kansas should export knowledge and know-how to change how these citizens of the world get their food, because if we don't do it, these refugees are just walking away from food sources that are no longer viable. We're going to cause conflict, and we're going to be much more expensive if we do it with soldiers, if we have to stop those conflicts with soldiers. So I think there's a real chance for Kansas farming and agriculture to lead us through the next century and through the things that we need to do here in Kansas locally and globally.
Thank you. At this time, I'll open it up to open floor. Anybody have any questions?
Tim, will there be a chance just to make some closing remarks? There's some.
Question here about inflation. Americans are being squeezed by inflation. It's why housing costs and everything else is so high. What do you see as an answer?
You got to cut military spending. You got to cut, if Europe wants to defend Ukraine, Europe can defend Ukraine. Okay, I know Russia's bad, but there's only two things to look at. Okay, here's the deal: either their tanks are old and rusty, and we can take them anytime, or we're wasting our money on killing the old rusty tanks. And when they send the good tanks, we're going to be at a loss. So let Europe defend Ukraine. We shouldn't be spending our money on that. That money needs to be spent here. If we spend it at all, we need to stop spending money on things that we really don't need federally. I'm a very fiscal conservative guy, but that's the only way to get it down is to stop spending federally.
Thank you, Mr. Ogle. Anybody else have an opinion on the issue?
Oh, I think we all do.
Okay, go ahead.
So, inflation comes from too much deficit spending. It's coming from the tariffs that have just hurt our farmers badly. And also, I don't know whether you have a Dollar Tree here, but the Dollar Tree is now a $1.25 tree. If the tariffs keep going, it's going to go to about $1.50 tree. I mean, inflation, tariffs are incredibly inflationary. But deficit spending, so we came out of the 2008, huge amounts of stimulus money were spent, huge amounts. And we finally got the deficit to come down. And in the last administration, it started coming back up. So what I never hear, in the last administration, the 4 years, their deficit spending was $8.4 trillion. And some of that went to subsidies for for wind and solar. Do you know how much of it went to subsidies for oil and gas? And by the way, when we're talking about energy independence, we are now drilling more than we ever have drilled in the history of this nation. We are an energy exporter today, and we still keep giving billions and billions of dollars to the oil and gas. So I am very glad. One of the things that I used to work for the pharmaceutical industry. Yes, and I said, you cannot pay me enough to do this. We have let corporations absolutely run this country. We have become an oligarchy, and that's where we are headed again. I am thrilled when I listened to the Republican National Convention to finally hear that we have some people standing up and saying enough is enough. So deficit spending comes from too much money spent by the government. It comes from tariffs, and we can do some things about those two things right away. Corporations, inflation. Corporations, if you noticed, after COVID, all the prices got jacked up. Have you seen them come back down? No. So
Thank you.
we know where inflation comes from.
All right. We have two, three who haven't yet addressed the issue.
I'll go. We didn't have inflation under Donald Trump. We sure the hell have it now under Joe Biden. So the first thing we can do to deal with our inflation issue is make sure that Joe Biden is defeated, assuming he remains the nominee, is defeated in November, and make sure we have a Republican House and a Republican Senate, so that we have good fiscal policy. The bottom line is, and it's both sides of the aisle that are guilty. We're spending money on things we don't need with money that we don't have. This is why we have a huge deficit. This is why we have a debt. We have to deal with our debt. We have to deal with the annual deficit. Our annual deficit now is 25, 26, 27% of our total budget. So we have to look at everything. I completely agree with Mike. I do not support what we're doing with Ukraine. Let's let Europe worry about the problems in Europe. We have our own war going on with our southern border. We're being invaded every day by military combatants, by terrorists, by sex traffickers, by drug traffickers. And we have a president with an open border policy. We have to deal with that. We have to close the border. We have to secure the border. We have to use the military to do so. And then we have to deport every illegal alien that is in America. Because if we don't, someday we're going to have a Democrat House, Senate, and White House, and they'll make all of them legal. They'll put them all on our entitlement programs, and our entitlement programs that are already stretched right now will sink overnight.
Thank you.
$37 trillion in debt. Rome wasn't there. You look at the history of Rome, you see the history of America. We're doing everything Rome did. We are spread thin on every avenue. Our minds are being controlled by what we watch, and we're staying busy with the sports, but we are not opening our minds to become what we should. A free people, a sovereign nation. We are divided on every front on purpose. So we cannot see what they are doing to us. $37 trillion in debt. How did that happen? Big corporation has entered Washington and paid off every politician. They say somewhere between 90 and 98%. Study. The Bible says study to show thyself approved. He wasn't just talking about the Bible. Study who your masters are, because they've made you slaves. Most men go to work 18 hours a day now to make it. I got 10 children. I know what it's like to work. I'd work 18 hours in that nonprofit and come home. We are in trouble on every avenue. There's no freedom left in our nation. Our Constitution is being violated. 3 out of the last 7 bills have had unconstitutional acts in there. Hidden eggs, pork. We have to stop Washington. We have to take some of the arms of Washington and abolish them. The CIA have been armed against us. The FBI have been armed against us. Look at the last few bills. We have to abolish them.
We are in big trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Lastly,
We need an honest conversation about inflation. I got the $1,250 Trump tax. I got paid. We all got paid. They were printing money. They printed money, and now we're reaping the consequences of that. As a country, we are also doing better than every other country in the world. If you look around, they all dealt with inflation. Our inflation is going down. They entered a recession. Let's have an honest conversation about where that money came from and what it's done. Let's have an honest conversation about the Trump tax cuts. As of today, they're at 21% for corporations. Same couple of corporations that Chad is railing against, I agree. They have been ripping us off. They inflated their prices and they never took them down. They're reaping record profits on our backs, but they're also getting tax cuts. It was 35% corporate tax rate before the 2017 tax cuts. Whose administration was that? Project 2025 wants to drop it to 18%. Let's have an honest conversation about where our money is coming from and where it's going. Let's have an honest conversation that if we want to lower inflation, we need to invest in our American people. We need to invest in good paying jobs. We have not had a minimum wage increase in 14 years. I'm down in Pittsburgh, I'm talking about child care workers who make $9.25 an hour. They can make more money at McDonald's. We're talking about housing. Child care is the biggest reason folks can't afford housing, because they have to work 2 jobs to decide if they're going to take care of kids. Chad, I don't know how you do it with 10. I'm impressed. If we want to talk about inflation, let's talk about the real issues. It is corporate greed, and it is a tax cut for the corporate rich, and it's not for us. We need to get control of our deficit, but we also need to give the American people a raise.
thank you. All right, that's the final question. Brief 2-minute break. We will have Karen Tyson and Stetson Kerr come to the stage. Thank you.
Gardeners, do you remember us? Gardeners, Red Garden. Yeah, I can think it, right? Which is good, really good. God knew what we needed this summer. I did. How's your family? Are they doing the fair thing coming up? I forgot your daughter's name.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take our seats. I'm going to keep this moving. It's now 7:37.
We'll do the Forest Fair stuff still. See ya.
Again, here in the back, don't be afraid to come up to the front. We have plenty of open seats at front seats. Okay, this is our final segment of the evening. This is related to the Kansas 12th Senate District primary. Again, if you are just finding your way in, we will take questions from the audience. Please submit a note card. I won't take questions simply by raising hands. The yellow means that you have 30 seconds remaining. The red means it's time to move on. We will give each candidate 2 minutes to make an opening statement. I have some questions here, but then I will entertain questions from the audience as well. Thank you very much to both of you for being here, and we will begin with Ms. Tyson.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for being here tonight, and I want to thank our sponsors, both parties and the paper. We appreciate them putting this together. It's not easy, you guys. It takes some effort and time, so very much appreciated. I am Karen Tyson. I do represent the 12th Senate District, and I am running for re-election. I am running for limited government, individual freedom, traditional values, and economic development. And I have walked the walk and proven results. One of the biggest things that I have worked on, and it was funny, I went back and looked at my old material when I ran 4 years ago, and one of the bullet points on it was exempt Social Security from state income tax. It took us 4 years, but guess what? We got it accomplished this year. We will no longer pay Kansas state income tax on Social Security. I look forward to your questions this evening and to visit with you about issues that are on your mind, because that's how we best represent the people, is by hearing what's on their mind. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tyson. Mr. Kerr.
My name is Stetson Kerner. I'm running for the simple reason of I believe in term limits, and I respect Senator Tyson and her time in. She's been in 3 terms. I feel like that's enough. It's absolutely, I told her at the last deal we were at together, absolutely nothing against her. It's just how I feel we need to go so we can be a leader for the federal government. I am a pipe fitter, so all these trades that everybody's been talking about, I am one. I apologize that I'm not dressed up. I came straight from work. I'm working 6 tens, 7 tens, depending on how the equipment shows up. So I am you. I have been you. I started off working building bridges for Beechner Construction, making $8.50 an hour, raising a daughter who was newborn while my fiance went to school. I know the struggles that we go through, and I know how to help us get through them. I am by far the youngest person here, I think, as far as running, and I don't think that's a bad thing to get some new ideas going and really expand our knowledge.
You can only say that because Russell has now left. Is Russell still here? No, okay. Keep going, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm short and sweet.
Okay. The first question came from an audience submission. It's related to House Bill 2105, which became law this month, even though Governor Kelly didn't sign the bill. It bans state colleges and universities from using the practice of diversity, equity, and inclusion when considering student admissions and faculty employment. Linking DEI considerations to faculty hiring or student enrollment will carry a $10,000 fine per violation of the law. Iowa is home to Allen Community College. What purpose does HB 2105 serve in fulfilling the mission of our colleges, specifically the required reporting portion? Ms. Tyson, go ahead.
I did vote for that legislation, and I do understand some people might be concerned. But my position is that when you start defining who can and can't come in, that's part of the problem. Let me give you a prime example. We had a bill a couple years ago on free speech on college campuses. Well, who in this room doesn't think that we have free speech now? We absolutely do. It's part of our Constitution, our U.S. and our state Constitution. It's our First Amendment right. So why would we put in legislation in Kansas to say that we have free speech on college campuses? We start defining that box, we start losing our free speech and the inclusion, exclusion. Don't define it. Everybody's accepted, and we know that.
Thank you, Ms. Tyson. Again, Mr. Kern, the question is related to House Bill 2105, which became law this month, that bans state colleges and universities from using the practice of diversity, equity, and inclusion when considering student admissions and faculty employment. The question is, what purpose does HB 2105 serve in fulfilling the mission of our community colleges, as Iowa is the home of Allen Community College?
Well, first of all, I forgot to mention this in my opening statement. My stepmother told me to say hello. She went to college here in Allen County. But we need to have the most qualified, whether it be student or faculty. I don't care if you're purple, blue, black, white, or whatever. I don't care if you're gay, straight, or bi. As long as you can do the job better than the person that you are up against, you should have the job. We do not need anything that says you get special treatment for hiring or admission.
Thank you. The next question was something that I learned. It was related to the Pike Reservoir project. It was a proposal introduced this February as Senate Bill 497. It died in the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, but would have provided for the construction of a dam and lake in northwest Bourbon County, as well as residential and commercial development of the lake waterfront, the development of recreational facilities, and the use of the lake as a public water resource and reservoir. It was requested for introduction by Senator Tim Schallenberger of Baxter Springs. Do you have an opinion on SB 497?
So, thank you. Any legislator can introduce any piece of legislation. And what happened with that, the reservoir, as soon as Senator Schallenberger introduced it, he heard from his constituents. In fact, we all heard from his constituents. And my constituents also. It would have been in the current Senate District of Senate District 12. People were upset. It would have been eminent domain to take that land, that property, and put that reservoir in. And so Senator Schallenberger called the chairman of agriculture, which happens to be south of here, Senator Virgil Peck, and asked him not to have a hearing on that legislation. So that legislation's not going anywhere. And if you want to see a controversial issue, they held meetings on that in Bourbon County, and there would be 200 and 300 people showing up at that meeting. So it was very controversial, and he did listen to his constituents.
Thank you. Mr. Carter, you got a comment?
I don't know anything about the bill, so I don't really have a comment.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It was good for me as well. I hadn't heard much about it. Please, and I'll let you answer this question first time. Please explain your position on the expansion of Medicaid in Kansas. Is there any way you could find a way to support it?
Yes, insurance is way too high. I pay.
Oh my gosh. What I'm talking about here is Medicaid expansion. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
If I said Medicare,
I know, yeah, believe you, I just missed it.
Okay.
Brain fart.
I apologize.
Yeah. Absolutely, I think we should expand it. I haven't dug down and done the dirty work and the legwork to really have an idea or a plan. But anything that can help our communities is much needed and always be supported, as long as it's done in the right way. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Tyson?
Sure, I've been consistent on Medicaid expansion. I've always said that we need a Kansas solution, and that's what I would look for, a Kansas solution. I'm going to go off a little bit here. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I want to thank Representative Fred Gardner. He's in the audience tonight, but you guys, I know we're supposed to hold our applause, but he's worth applauding for. He has studied this issue and gives an excellent answer, and so I'm going to paraphrase a little bit of what he says, which is 100% accurate. We have expanded Medicaid in the sense of taking people off the waiting list for Medicaid. And that absolutely does need to happen. Those in need, those that cannot help themselves, yes, we need to have that safety net for them. But full-blown Medicaid expansion, that's a whole nother story. And we need to make sure, eyes wide open, that we know what we're doing when we work on this legislation.
Thank you. Ms. Tyson, I'll let you answer this next question first. How would you consider funding or removing funding for the Kansas Public Broadcasting System? Showing all your list of favorite hits.
I love that question because I made a motion in committee to strip taxpayer-funded money going to PBS. Now, my husband says I shouldn't tell this part. I listen to PBS all the time. I listen to NPR, I listen to all stations. That's how you find out about the issues. That's how you hear both sides. I'm not saying shut PBS down. I'm saying they push a political agenda and they didn't want to hear what it was, but it was women's sports. I was extremely upset about a show that they used taxpayer-funded money to promote against women's sports. I disagree with that totally. There's a reason we have Title IX. There's a reason that we have protections. There's a reason that we have a man and a woman's locker room. So I made a motion in committee to strip Kansas taxes from paying for public, PBS, public broadcasting station. I stand by that. And the irony is, watch what you do in Topeka. I never dreamed this would come. The money got put back in, and it got increased. So PBS should be thanking me. But I did talk to the president of PBS. We had a great conversation. I told her what my concerns was. She explained to me how their process works. It's fine. If they want to push a political agenda, that's on them. But our taxpayer money, I don't care what the agenda is. I don't care if it would have been a conservative agenda. Our taxpayer money should not be pushing a political agenda, period. That's where I stand.
Thank you. Mr. Graham?
I could not agree more with Senator Tyson. We have other issues that our tax money could be spent on, or better yet, let's just not give that money out, let's return it back to the people. There's no reason for, like Senator Tyson said, for anything getting tax revenue to be pushing a political agenda. To be honest with you, I'm just a younger male version of Senator Tyson. It seems like the more I'm around her, so it's kind of hard to go against her.
This is my final question, and we'll take questions from the floor. Please explain your position related to public education, specifically K-12 funding in the state.
I can get that one. So I was on the school board in Pleasanton where I live. I got elected there at the age of 26 because I like to do things young. And I was a part of it right at the tail end of the Brownback era where we were fighting for funding. We need to push less with standardized testing for our funding and more towards our technical schools and things of that nature. My retirement plan is to teach at a technical school because I love passing on information to young kids. My son is 10 years old, just started, he said, Dad, I want to learn how to weld. So we are welding away. We built a smoker. He wants to do enter one in the 4-H. It's that kind of education we need more than just the books and testing. That's all I got.
Thank you. Ms. Tyson?
Thank you. I don't think there's anybody in this room that wouldn't talk or agree with how important education is. And I'm one of the biggest advocates for education. I wouldn't have had some of the jobs that I had. As most of you may know, I have an engineering degree, software engineer from K-State, a math degree from K-State, or computer science degree from K-State, and then a engineering management master's from KU. I've worked in the technology field for over 30 years now. I love my jobs, and I tell everybody I was Kansas educated, and I would not have had those jobs if I would not have had such a great education in Kansas. Part of the problem with our education is they made the conversation about money, and I would dispute that. My dad always said, it's not how much you make, it's how you spend the money. And I think we're to that point. They've had over $1.5 billion increase in the last 3 years in K-12 funding. And the money's still not getting to the classroom and to the teachers. And we are teaching to a test. And that's part of the problem. Let the teachers teach. Most of those people went into that arena. I've got so many family members. We went to a wedding, over 400 people, all family and friends. Over half of them had something to do with education. They were either teachers, principals, the janitors. I mean, education is a big part of my family and our lives. And we know how important it is. But let's start having the conversation about what education is really needs to be for these days. And I do think some of the technical stuff, one of the best things that happened, and I know he doesn't get a lot of credit for it, was Senate Bill 155 when I was a freshman in the House. And that allows, I'll talk about it later, but it allows technical education, and it's a win-win-win for the community colleges, the students, and the communities.
Thank you, Ms. Tyson. Does anybody have any questions for consideration? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you very much. That concludes our program. Thank you to all of you. I'm sorry? Oh, I didn't give anybody else closing statements, so I'm just gonna cut it off there if that's okay.